was 2:30 in the afternoon on the 28th of June, 2008. A young woman plummeted to her death in the middle of Water Street on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, just above the financial district. When I read the story on that, what stood out to me was not that she was a fashion model or that she was just 3 days short of her 21st birthday, but her name was Ruslana Korshunova, and she was from Kazakhstan. And I had been to Kazakhstan several times, and I felt a kind of connection there. So I dove into the articles, and I read different things, and I studied all the pictures that the Daily News put up online. And the thing that jumped out at me is that within 24 hours after her death, the police ruled it a suicide. And I had lived and worked in New York City 17 years. I had been at the scene of 3 suicide deaths, people who'd jumped. One of them was from my own building, and I'd actually seen the guy drop past the window on his way down. And the thing was, none of them wound up in the middle of the street. They all, apparently suicides are not looking for bragging rights, you know, and they all land close to the building they just left. Now, at the time, I was writing a blog, and I had my readership in the low double digits. And I wrote about news and current events and that sort of thing. So this was a natural for me. I wrote it up, and I said this was not suicide. Nobody jumps from the apartment balcony to the middle of the street, which, by the way, was farther than any Olympic gold medalist had ever jumped. That's what I wrote. Now, because I guess she was a fashion model and had some following, this became news not only in the New York area, but across Europe as well. And if you Googled Ruslana Korshunova, my blog would pop up on that search page, the first page search page. And all of the other articles about her took on the same tone, almost moralistic. You know, here was this poor girl went to this big city seduced by the bright lights and jet set lifestyle and became depressed by it all and took her own life. And I was the only one saying, no, somebody did this to her. So as a result of perhaps the search and my take on it, my readership jumped from the 20s and 30s up to more than 1,000. Actually, it topped out at a little over 1,300. And what's more remarkable is I began getting feedback in my comments section on the blog, which was something that had never happened before. All I'd ever gotten was spam. But now real people were sending me real comments, and some of them were giving me new information or giving me new sources of information. So I wrote a couple more blogs, and I addressed the 2 big issues involved here. One was, why didn't the police see it the way I did? And 2, who killed her and why? Now, obviously, I didn't have the answers, but there were clues, and I discussed those. One of the things that inspired the second question, answer that, is that in one of my trips to former Soviet Union, a local official had told me that in my hotel a few weeks before, local Russian mafia had come in, taken a foreign businessman out of his room, up to the roof, and threw him off. And I knew from everything I'd read that Ruslana was being pressured by several different Russian entities who wanted to exploit her in one way or another, and she was resisting them. Now, do these dots connect? Well, I don't know. But if they did, I was getting into some pretty deep water here, and there were some pretty nasty people out there. And then I got a message from someone who said he was a personal friend of Ruslana's in New York, and could we talk by email, which would be more private than in the comments section. Now, at this point, I could see that I might be getting in over my head, but I'd come this far, and I'd been over my head before, so what the heck. And come to find out, he was a friend of hers, and he was helping Ruslana's mother, Valentina, who had come to New York to settle her daughter's affairs. And Valentina did not believe that her daughter had committed suicide either. She had been to the police, she had been to the medical examiner, and both of them said the case is closed, we can't reopen it unless you provide us with new evidence. So she'd hired a private investigator, and he took her money and nothing else. And now her last hope was if they could find a medical examiner who would disagree with the New York examiner and provide them with an excuse to reopen the case. So that was their question to me. Did I know anyone? And I told them, well, no. And second, I'm in Virginia, not in New York. But if you like, I'll look around down here and see if I can find someone. And I did. I went online, I searched there, and I made a number of phone calls. And I found a guy out in Central Virginia who said he would look into it. I told him what the case was, and he sent me his schedule of fees. Okay. I sent back to him. I said, now, here's what you can do. You can either FedEx the autopsy file directly to this guy, and he'll review it. Or if you want, you can send it to me, and I will hand carry it out there and make sure that everything's taken care of and bring it back to you. That didn't work for Valentina. Her worst fear was that the autopsy photos of her daughter would wind up on the internet or in some magazine somewhere. She did not want to see her daughter's death exploited that way. She would bring the folder herself. Okay, I called this guy back, made an appointment, and then I met Valentina and the interpreter at Union Station, took a day off work. Now, if you look up the pictures of Ruslana, and you should, she was a beautiful girl. She had oak brown hair, and in some photos it went down to her knees, very long hair. Her mother, you could see the resemblance. Valentina was 48 years old, reportedly, and wore a strong resemblance to her daughter, very striking woman. She had platinum blonde hair, big kind of poofy page boy thing. The interpreter was in his mid-20s and was not nearly so memorable. But I put them in the car, and we started off. And now, up until this point, I think I had handled things fairly well. That was all about to end. In 2008, I did not have GPS. I had an official state of Virginia road map, and I had a printout from MapQuest of the neighborhood where we were going. And off we went, and we got to the town and could not make that connection from one map to the other. And I'm driving around in circles. Called the medical examiner. I said, I'm here, but I'm going to be running late. I can't find where you are. And we finally arrived an hour late for the meeting. By that point, my credibility was shot. We went into a small public library, which is where we were supposed to be, and into a conference room there. The medical examiner had a colleague with him, and Valentina and the interpreter sat with those two people up at one end of the conference table, and I was relegated to the other end. I was not allowed to look at the folder at all. So I sat there and watched them go through it, page by page, leaf by leaf. And finally they got to the end, and the medical examiner said to her, he said, I'm not really an expert on falls. He said, I can't write a proper opinion on this. He said, I could recommend a couple people to you, and you can tell them I referred you. Well, let me tell you, Valentina had been slapped down at every turn since arriving in the U.S. And she left that library devastated. Now, she was stoic about it. She wasn't crying or anything, but you could tell she was really upset. I was upset. I'd talked to this turkey on the phone, and if he told me then he wasn't an expert on falls, we could have done something else. But so God put him in the car, and we started driving back. And after a while, she asks me, she says, why are you doing this? Now, I never question my own motives. I find that always to be depressing. But I wanted to say something that was sincere. And so I thought about it and said, well, what happened to your daughter was horrible. It's a terrible tragedy. but I didn't know Ruslana, and there are tragedies every day. I said, however, I've spent 20 years in law enforcement, and when I see somebody in that profession who doesn't do his job properly and people are hurt, I feel personally offended, and I get very angry. And I said I was hoping to try to even the scales a little bit. So she accepted that, and we went on. And then I realized we'd missed lunch, and it would be nice to try to do something for her. So I pulled into a Cracker Barrel to give her a little taste of Americana, and we went in. Toward the end of the meal, which was pretty silent, she asked me another question. She said, "What do you hope to get out of this?" And I said, "Nothing. I'm certainly nothing from you. I don't get paid for my blog. I don't make a penny off what I write. And if I'd stopped there, it might have been okay. But I love hypothetical questions." And my mind wandered, and I said, "Well, but if we find out who did this, it is too good a story, and someone in Hollywood's going to want to make a movie about it. And I have a degree in film. I would love to get involved as a consultant or something like that." I said, "Again, nothing from you. The production company would pay me if there was any payment to be made, and I could look out after your interests during the process." Now, what I should have realized is that having suffered so much to this point, Valentina was looking for an excuse to explode. And as my wife could tell you, I am very good at providing those excuses. "I don't need you to support, to look after my affairs. I can take care of myself. I can look out after everything. I don't need you out there doing anything at all, blah, blah, blah." Like I said, I should have seen that coming, but I didn't, and I was rather shocked. And so I let her pay for her own lunch. And then we went back toward Union Station, and along the way, I tried to get into it again, and I said, getting the government to reopen something and to push it toward a conclusion could take weeks or months, and you're really going to need a partner over here who can do that, preferably someone in New York, because I can't do it. And she said, "No, it's over. I'm going home. Please don't write anything more about my daughter." And I said, "Well, that's easy. I don't have any more material." So that was an easy promise to make. Now, the story I have just told you, if I were to go to Hollywood and pitch that, nobody would pick it up because, A, there's no resolution, it's depressing, and the bad guys are still out there. So it would never work in Hollywood. However, that's exactly the way every Russian movie ends. So at least, it is culturally authentic. And if you want to read more about it, and there is more to read, please Google Ruslana Korshenova, and you'll see all the articles and all the pictures of her from her modeling. And if you want to see my blogs, since I'm no longer on the first page, just look up Ruslana and R.P. Barr, and you can see that. Wish it was a better ending. Thank you.